So let's kick off. Dexter of Mindset AI is very kindly recording this, and thanks for all your help in setting this up. So I've got the pleasure of hosting this on behalf of Mindsets.ai. Jack is the CEO. Dexter's been helping with the marketing and the organization of this. So thanks to both of you for allowing me to come on. We've got Joel Osborne of Discy.ai, and we've got Alan Crawley of Optima Partners. We've all, we think, got interesting things to say about the present and the future of AI, especially as it relates to consulting firms, and especially as it relates to the growth of boutique consulting firms. What we're going to do before we get into things, I'm going to ask Jack, Joel, and Alan to introduce themselves. Chaps, starting with Jack, if that's okay. If you just give a 2-minute overview of you, your company, and exactly what you're using AI for in your firms, if that's okay. Jack, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Yeah, so my name is Jack. I'm Chief Product Officer, but co-founder of Mindset AI. A little bit about myself. My absolute passion really is all around how to use AI technology, and to be honest, very soon the robotics that are about to come through because of this, to benefit everybody and not just the select handful of people. So it's kind of my deep passion. My entire life and career has been building businesses within training, learning, upskilling, mentoring, coaching, things like that. So a little bit about Mindset. Now, we're what we consider a app builder platform. Okay, so we launch applications working with coaching consulting businesses within change management, learning, coaching, and well-being, and all who deliver L&D solutions. So all of our customers, they all have their own platforms to become a kind of edtech business model for themselves, and to kind of scale themselves to move to recurring revenue and things like that. Now, the way we use AI has been fascinating. So what makes us incredibly different is actually that we started the entire business from an architectural technology point of view, which is going, what happens if software and technology could adapt to people, and people didn't have to adapt to software? So I don't have to have a one-size-fits-all experience. Everything is bespoke. And so we built an entire machine learning and AI database to help move an entire platform like a social media experience. And now what we've built is essentially the ability to become and clone expert consultants who are in our customer base. So essentially we've added about 5 different technologies on top of ChatGPT to enable it to happen, but using unstructured transcripts, assets, videos. That's what me and Joe are actually just talking about. Essentially you can get every bit of expertise on scenarios and what to do in those scenarios and how to deal with them, to essentially help your customers answer, your clients ask questions 24/7, and it'll answer as if it's you, and the ability for you to train that model.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, but just prior to the webinar, I said, wouldn't it be a great idea if X happened? And Jack basically said, yes. We've just finished that, Joe. Thank you. So ever behind the times. Joel, if you wouldn't mind, tell us who you are and what's happening at Discy, please.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'll just say why I'm here, outline Discy, and if time permits, I'll share a quick story that sets a bit more context. So firstly, my co-founder and I were both consultants in Big Four and boutiques. I spent time with IBM, 12 plus years with a large firm, and then circa 2 years with a boutique. And really my experience has always been, and my passion, I guess, has been looking at technology from the perspective of how can it be adopted and used by individuals and firms most effectively, which is hopefully something I can bring to this discussion, kind of more the why and who is this for, that could sometimes be a bit of an afterthought. Now, I guess you would say my experience in consulting, fantastic, but I switched to building tools for consultancies that actually suited how they work. And I think a big frustration that led to that was not really having a better way to access the collective intelligence of the firm when either selling or delivering projects. And you'll probably hear me talk about that a few times as we go through today. Discy.ai is our bet to solve this frustration. So really our starting point was seeing how AI could drive more insight in the discovery process. So your interviews, surveys, etc. The platform's immediate value isn't improving this process. The teams that are using it are using Discy to analyze the qualitative data from those sources to build deeper recommendations. And that's for the strategy projects, customer experience, change, readiness projects, op model, M&A, etc. I think the exciting part then, Joe, to your question was, for partners that want to go beyond this, it's now becoming a vehicle to unlock more value from the unstructured knowledge. So this is that recognition that what consultants have and how they capture knowledge isn't in the cleanest state to do much with it. So that's kind of context. And I guess as a quick story, just before I hand over, 7 years ago, I had a BD conversation with the CIO of a telco about process mining. And he shared very clearly kind of his frustration with a 3 to 4 week discovery project. He just wanted a solution to plug in the firm's insights, quickly identify areas for automation, which kind of gave two frustrations for me, which I think will resonate with most people. Obvious one is we didn't have that solution. The way most internal knowledge in firms, certainly my one, is more like digitized filing cabinet. So you can query it to find an answer, but you definitely couldn't connect that to the scam that you would define for the client. And I guess just the second frustration was it just felt that we could have been a bit more insight-led just stepping into that meeting, which was existing client, live projects, loads of interviews that have been had with that client's particular business stakeholders, and none of those insights really being available for us as we kind of step in and step through that conversation. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Thank you, Joel. And with my academic hat on, I'm very interested in this, obviously, from a we analyze vast amounts of data and it takes a huge amount of time, but I'm imagining the PhD landscape is probably going to change significantly in the next few years. Alan, last but not least, thanks for your time. Do please tell us about yourself and Optima Partners.
Sure. So hopefully this is coming across okay. I was having trouble with my laptop, but I'm on my phone now. So apologies if that's not coming across perfectly. But my background is in mainstream consulting. I've been in the business for 30 odd years now. I came up through kind of a classic route, which was Anderson Consulting, as was now Accenture, PwC, a short stint at McKinsey, and then working in boutique consultancies, one that we spun out of McKinsey in 1999, and then subsequently most of the time spent in Optima. So Optima is exactly the context, if you like, of this webinar. So we are a boutique/challenger, but scaling business. And we have all the challenges that Jack and Joel were outlining earlier on in terms of access to knowledge, the ability to process our knowledge base really quickly and efficiently. But first and foremost, our interest in applied AI. Actually, we don't make the distinction between AI and machine learning. So applied advanced analytics, or AI ML, at scale is really how can we bring huge productivity benefits to our clients. And we tend to work with big brands, household names in banking and insurance, in telecoms and energy, and in the pharmaceutical sector. So we're constantly looking for creative ways of applying AI in all its forms. We're fascinated by the power and potential of applying AI, both in terms of how we can be more productive, but then also in terms of how we can help our clients to be more productive. And we operate across a number of different use cases. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about Jack and Joel's businesses and what the guys do. I've had a look, and I'm interested from a potential buyer standpoint because I really like what they've been doing. So I guess for me, I guess I'm bringing the kind of the boots on the ground. We're busy working with clients day in, day out, and constantly looking for ways in which we can improve productivity and performance. And we see AI as having a significant role to play in that in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan. Very kind. Okay, and just for interest's sake, I am Joe Mahoney. I'm a professor of consulting at Cardiff University, but also an advisor to boutique firms on specifically around growth. And obviously, AI, big data, data analytics, and data visualization are a big part of the customer interface for boutique consultancies, but also potentially, as Alan said, to help them improve internally as well. And there's huge opportunities to cut costs, improve efficiency through the implementation of some of these technologies. Alan, and then I guess one of the big things here is that we've got a whole host of people that aren't just using ChatGPT, and this is something that I wanted to just do a brief introduction of, because at the moment there's a huge amount of hype on ChatGPT, and the Microsoft implementation of it, and the Google and Facebook competitors that are coming along. But I wanted to give a brief overview for those of you, because when we talk about AI, it's easy to see it as very science fiction-y. In effect, in my view, I define it as something that enables machines to learn, adapt, analyze, and predict in a complex data environment. And by complex, I mean something that's changing fast, sometimes data that's uncertain, sometimes data that's incomplete. So it's not where you would expect traditional computing to work very well. I'm going to give just a very quick overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about AI, because it's a fairly big umbrella term. There's 6 things, and it could be 5, it could be 8, depending where you're coming from. Some people would add in robotics, but I'm leaving it out. But the one we're hearing about at the moment is ChatGPT, which is a large language model that reads and generates accurate human-like text. So a good example of this is OpenAI's ChatGPT, and the user case would be saving consultants time or assisting support agents to reduce waiting times by creating textual answers. Number 2, expert systems. Now, expert systems are more around mimicking specific experts. So you might think about IBM's Watson, that's being used in oncology to firstly analyze, but also predict cancer rates from specific scans. And so in effect, it's doing the job that a doctor did, but it's doing it better and faster and cheaper. Thirdly, machine learning, and this is much more around a fairly learning from, so the app is learning from data to make decisions or predictions. A good example of this is around customer behavior. So I think it was American Express that uses machine learning to analyze transactions in real time to identify fraud more quickly. So that's the 3rd type. 4th type is deep learning. This typically uses something called artificial neural networks, although that can be used for different types of artificial intelligence, and to learn from very large complex data sets. And this is what you would experience if you've signed up to Amazon or Netflix, where you're getting personalized recommendations from everything from your mouse hovering over something for a couple of seconds all the way through to you clicking buy. So Netflix uses it for personalized content recommendations. The 5th one, which probably relates to consulting a little bit less, is computer vision, which is much more visual. So it's the ability of AI to recognize and understand visual data. Amazon Go, for example, I don't know, you must have seen it. It's the shopping experience of Amazon, which uses computer vision to track customers in stores when they're picking up items to buy, and then it charges them automatically, so you don't have to ever go to a checkout. Slightly worrying, but it seems to work. And finally, natural language processing, which can NLP, which can again be used in all different types of the AI that we've been talking about. But it's very good at interacting with human language to understand, in inverted commas, interpret and generate text. So you see a fair number of companies using NLP analysis to analyze their documents so that it presents data that is ready for AI to interrogate better. So that's as technical as we're going to get. So we're going to keep, I'm certainly not a technical person, but we're going to keep it quite high level. But though I guess the thing I wanted to get across was that we're not just talking about ChatGPT and it auto generating PowerPoints when we're talking about AI. So listen, we've got these great people here. So let's dive into the first question, which is really around how you see AI, and let's extend it slightly to sort of machine learning and data analytics and a few other things that AI would integrate with. How do you see AI benefiting consultancies on their internal operations? So let's not jump to sort of what it can do for customers. So let's talk about internal operations. And Alan, if you wouldn't mind going first, because I know you've got some very specific examples and experience here.
So I think a little bit about what we're doing. So we're growing very, very quickly across a number of different practice areas. And I think the biggest challenge that we have, or one of the biggest challenges that we have, is how do we make available to all of our consultants and data scientists the body of knowledge that we have within the organization. So let me layer that, because this becomes quite important, I think. So we generate, like all consultancies, we generate vast amounts of Word documents and PowerPoint documents and so on. A lot of analytical output, etc. And we currently store all of that within a SharePoint environment, and that's okay. But it's quite a bind. It's quite administratively tricky. Takes a lot of time. It's actually quite difficult to find things unless they're catalogued in a very particular way. And of course, you have to have somebody looking after the cataloging. So we see knowledge management as probably the best. Or the most important use case that we can start to think seriously about applying AI to in the context of this. And that means that we can be much more productive, much more efficient at the way about finding information quickly and managing consistency in terms of the information that we have available to our clients. So knowledge management, absolutely key. That's the first thing. The second thing is consistency of things like proposal writing. So proposals, everybody knows, proposals are often fairly standard. So if you're writing a proposal for one particular use case in one client, it's pretty much similar to the way that you would construct that with some boilerplate that you would drop in and out. So we think there's a tremendous opportunity for AI to be used to improve the average standard of the proposals that we write. Obviously, you always want senior management oversight over these things, but we think we can be much more efficient about the way that we go about it. Just to put it in context, so we have we kind of at any point in time we run probably 100 different projects. And we have multiple statements of work being written and issued constantly for new pieces of work. We're very, like a lot of people on this call, will be very diligent about the way that we do that. So we think there's tremendous opportunity for standardizing the way we go about that. I think to begin with, those are probably the two biggest where we can apply.
Great, thank you. Joel, do you have? Can you go into any more detail about things that Jack has already talked about, or if there's something you'd like to add to that in terms of efficiencies?
Thanks, Joe. As you know, kind of what Jack talked about is very much our heartland, so there's a lot we can go into. Before I go there, I think just really quickly, I know you had another question, or as part of the question, there's also kind of we kind of looked at it as there is what you can do out of the box with AI solutions today, as well as kind of the more specialist kind of solutions that Alan is referring to. I think on what you do out of the box, which is largely aimed towards productivity, like Alan mentioned, it is what you would expect. It is improvements towards business writing, slide generation. It's enabling your consultants to do a bit more than what they can do now quicker. So that is, using tools like Copy AI, Grammarly, that everyone's familiar with, Dictopus, beautiful AI, and Tome, but I know you mentioned recently yourself, Joe. On the aspect of, let's say, knowledge, that's, we've always said that is kind of what we see as the biggest utilized asset that firms have. So really glad to hear that Alan is investigating that, and that's certainly where we would start as well. If I would go a bit deeper into it, I think the options that gives you, besides the proposal writing, is it also what we've seen it potential use cases, as well as generating of that first draft of exec summaries, that first draft of status updates, which are pretty repeated kind of materials that require a lot of manual grab and go from various sources, whereby actually, if you could connect it into your insights as to both those previous examples, this is what we tend to see happen based on these inputs, based on what we've seen either directly in this client or in other similar clients with similar challenges. You can almost do that first pass of it, rather than someone spending the Friday evening having chased everyone down for all the status updates, working till 11 p.m. until they consolidate something competent enough to send on to their client. So that's kind of what we see on that aspect. And I guess the flip side of that, or the consideration, which maybe we'll have a chance to get into, is how do you start to generate and build that without running into the friction that you often do with a lot of these solutions? So I'm sure Alan will be able to give us loads of examples of knowledge management quickly becomes a bit of a cottage industry. It becomes a lot of effort. It becomes, let's do our knowledge drive. Let's get all of our clients in to put something in place. And then you hit the challenge of how well do we as consultants really know how to codify that knowledge so that it can be used, gleaned, going forward, right? So that it can be surfaced in the workflows of people as they're using it. And so a couple of things just to think about there. Nowadays, a lot of us, we have a question, YouTube, what's the answer to YouTube? Video tutorial around it, something really easy to walk through. Likewise, a lot of us, as we've learned to kind of talk about what we do and explain that to someone else afterwards, it is more a case of work with this person, go write up what we've just done in a project, and then you fall victim towards bias and recency memory as to what you think you happened, and all of those good secret sauce juiciness around what was it that actually you had to do and work through and think about to get to that answer tends to be left out of the out of your knowledge asset. So a couple of thoughts there.
Thank you, Joel. And Jack, I know you will have more than a couple of things to say about the opportunities for AI for improving productivity and value internally for consultancies.
I mean, I think everyone did a really good job. I mean, the philosophy really here is better, faster, cheaper in most things. How it is essentially, and the way we've always looked at it is, let's identify jobs to be done and then rank them in terms of value created and mistakes made, and things really that distract from the most important things we should be doing. Perhaps that's person-to-person interaction or whatever the most valuable thing you deliver as part of your business. That's what you want to optimize towards. So I think everyone did a great job here. I mean, I can only speak to how we've thought about it in terms of the customers we've worked with. Obviously, a lot of our customers, once they've delivered certain aspects of their job, they often deliver certain parts of L&D. Maybe L&D solutions, upskilling, retraining, supporting managers or CEOs or execs, whatever it may be. And some of the other things that I think are really powerful is once you, and that's what we've done is essentially it's really powerful is once you've got all your knowledge, okay, and you can actually start work, and you said natural language processing, but essentially once you can pull out all the themes, automated, pull out all the themes and then able to semantically search for those, then it becomes something that's really, really powerful. But that same layer there can also support your clients. That's a real thing. We've spent a lot of time focusing on it because there's a million productivity tools. And, my message to every single person really is literally ask your team, how would you cut 8 hours a week through your job? Go find AI tools, come back each week, let's have a sprint. That's like the core message. There's a billion productivity tools. And I think it just like the .com bubble, we're going to get a million tools that are kind of, a lot of them will see how well they do. Whether they actually just get, they fade out of nowhere. But, from the knowledge perspective and knowledge capture and knowledge management, I think you're 100% on it. Because what I see is the real power behind that is not just saving just time. It's also then, and I don't want to jump any guns. I don't know where you're going with this, Joe, but, where else does that then lead? So it's essentially every single interaction should find a way to track it. Joe, before the call, Joe said he's been recording everything he does that he's allowed to do. The perfect way of thinking, because once you've got that kind of pipeline whereby you can identify themes, extract themes, and search for those themes, you're going to save a massive amount of time. But I think everyone else does a really good job.
Thank you, Jack. So in reference to what Jack just said about recording things, it's something I'm telling all my clients to do at the moment, is to record as many meetings, client interactions that they're allowed to do as possible, because the amount of data that is now available just through people talking is immense, and data is what AI learns from. And so if ever you want to personalize rather than AI learning off the internet, if you ever want AI to learn off you, or people in your firm, specifically around how you do things, how you say things, and how you think, then the more data you have on that, the better. And so I'm encouraging all my clients not necessarily to implement it now, but start recording things so that when they think about implementing some of these technologies in a couple of years' time, they've got more data than they would otherwise have.
Joe, I just wanted to add, just before we jumped in, and I was just thinking then, and it's something that I really recommend every single person to check out. So at the moment, let's talk LLMs, right? There's lots of other models, but that's where we're at today in terms of widespread use. Very easily, any single, and then this is outside of what we're all kind of doing as our business, but any single person can use Zapier or use any of the plugins and start to map entire workflows out, So you're not using multiple tools. You can use literally, again, once you've got that knowledge part, the knowledge capture and knowledge management right, you can literally create entire workflows using plugins through Zapier that any single person can build themselves, all the no-code tools that exist out there. And suddenly you can create entirely streamlined workflows that essentially you can, and there's this tool called AutoGPT, I'm sure people have heard of it, that is more focused on you set an objective and it will create tasks and subtasks. So actually what you're going to start to see more and more is a real assistant and an employee versus just knowledge management. So it's actually thinking about mapping your jobs to be done, the workflows and the plugins that enable that to happen.
Great, thank you. So I don't want to get too technical, but all three of you have pointed towards a potential use of this for knowledge management. I'd like to just go a little bit deeper on, in terms of if I've got a boutique and I've got 20 to 50 people working for me, I've been going for 5 years, we've got tons of proposals and reports and research and client data and all the rest of it. How do I go from all that disparate data in different formats to a credible knowledge management system? Because you and I all know that many of the knowledge management systems out there are in effect relatively complex file structures with a relatively good search engine, that approximates what Google search used to be on your desktop. Not really that useful. So in practical terms, how would I, as a boutique owner, end up with something that my consultants could use that would get them much better data much quicker? Anyone to answer?
I can kick off with maybe a slightly kind of left stage view on this, because I think the enemy of this is chaos, right? So if people think, so I'll preamble it with saying we have a working group in our data science and engineering team specifically looking at this topic. And it would be interesting to keep people updated on what the outputs from that are. But what we've worked out pretty early on is that we actually, structure is your friend. So you have to bring a lot more structure to what you do, I think, in order to really unlock the power and potential of AI deployed in this way. So complete lack of organization, lack of structure. Anybody can do anything. There are no standards. There are no templates. I think becomes a bit of a challenge. I think it would be then quite difficult to elicit really useful, powerful nuggets of insight or information from a poorly organized infrastructure. So that would be my starting point. So I would want to know that the way that we structure and organize documents is as standard and consistent as possible. The way that we write proposals, the way that we write proposals is templated. It's a very structured document that we use. The way that we incorporate information from third-party sources, again, is quite highly structured. So that gives you the foundation then to deploy some of the tools that Jack's been talking about to really good effect.
Good, thank you. That's really useful. Joel, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I think I'd love to build on Alan's point. I think that's brilliant, Alan. It's almost one of the things we see is that there's some firms who are quite well defined as to what makes them special, what that IP is, and then how do you actually define that to the length of degree that across an end-to-end engagement, and by this I also include kind of the marketing and selling of that, through towards recapitalizing that knowledge to then use going onwards, they're actually quite clearest around that. And there's a couple of examples I can give later on, but the majority that you see, and there are a lot that we've spoken to are also on this kind of journey, actually find it challenging because they don't quite have that, yes, this is exactly what the best practice looks like for each of these stages of our workflow. This is what we are looking for to drive kind of how we want to consistently talk about this, the taxonomy that we're going to use as a firm, and kind of what we need to search for as we start to build out this, this knowledge data set. I think the other element, which is really important to consider, and it's one of the approaches that we've learned and which we've started to adopt, is that, and this is back to my industry, knowledge management as an industry and a cottage industry and the friction. Consultants are probably one of the most busiest, stressed people that there are. There is so much they have to do. There's so little time that they have to do it in, that actually when they are faced with a situation of, do I have something which I can easily search, which gives me the answer in a good enough level that I can apply it to what I need to do, versus just say, I'll recreate it, or I will Google it, it becomes a really, very clear race as to which one's going to win. One of the things that we looked at actually was you need to start thinking about what is something which a consultant has to do anyway. It is part of the work, and it's something which they do that in doing so, the way that they are gathering, capturing, processing data is kind of the way that we want to be capturing the insights and the way that they're generating insights. And so that's why we started with kind of the discovery process, because that is a natural standard part of every project, and it's a natural way whereby you almost put something in there which makes it just easier for consultants, which gets you over the adoption challenge that any solution is inevitably going to come up against. And then, the last point I would say with that is you also then need to consider how you start to sunset and move people off kind of what they do as their crutches or what they currently work with to make anything successful in the long run.
Yeah, that last point is, anyone that's been involved in IT or tech consulting for any time will always know that the machine side of it is actually the easiest bit. It's getting people to change. And as we all know, there's very enthusiastic adopters of this, but there's also people, who perhaps aren't. Jack, have you got anything to add before we move on?
I think we can move on.
Okay, good. Okay, well, in that case, the next question is going to be right up your street, because I know you've got some strong thoughts on this, and this is about the future. So we've talked about what's possible now, and I want us all to refrain, if you don't mind, from being over exuberant, because I realize we're on a hype curve at the moment, and there's predictions out there that there's going to be no consultants left in a few years, and I've noticed a few companies making redundancies and blaming it on AI as opposed to economy or bad management or whatever. So what can we expect in the next 5 years, Jack? What should we be prepared for as owners of boutique consulting firms, or even partners in larger consulting firms?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic point well made around the hype cycle. I think there's there's so much about it that reminds you of the dot-com bubble that happened many years ago, which is everybody can see the transformative potential it's going to have, but when that all lands, it's already had a much bigger impact than the hype cycle around blockchain, for example. It's already had much bigger impact than that. But when it's going to lead to this huge transformational impact of general intelligence and robots, walking the planet, nobody has a clue. And actually, I think most people are in the pause mode and figure this out mode versus, okay, let's sack everyone. I completely agree. The likes of IBM saying they're going to replace most jobs with AI, I think it probably is masking other things that are going on.
Sure.
But I do think though that we're in a kind of point in time where you can sit there and kind of pause and figure this out. But I think, Alan, you've been doing it beautifully by the sounds of it, which is we can only predict so much. But what we can do today is these things, and that's going to help us lower the cost of, increase our margins through lowering costs, make us more efficient, make us deliver more value, better, faster, and cheaper today with what we've got. So I think that's the kind of first starting point. And if I look 5 years into the future, I think what we're going to start to have really is the importance of being an AI expert, because what you're seeing is, for example, prompt engineers, let's say, Lots of job roles which are only going to be focused on making the algorithm better. Because a lot of these, workflows around consultancies, a lot of them aren't going to change. Some of them will be enhanced, some of them will be replaced, which is hard to tell, but people to people won't be. And essentially the role is approver and editor a lot of the time, feed in data, capture data to the point on knowledge management, the systems around knowledge management and capture, feed it more data, train that model yourself as a consultancy, I believe, versus just everyone else doing it, but train that model and approve, edit, refine the answers so it's actually going to solve a problem. Because ultimately, as a consultancy, you guys, every single person has context that exists outside of always outside of data. There's a lot of context that is going on still that you're applying and making sure it's actually going to solve a problem. So over the next 5 years, I think there's going to be a lot that's going to change, because I think everyone kind of focuses on themselves, and this is what this call is about, right? I'm a consultancy, how's it going to affect me? But the question also should be, who am I selling to and what role do they do and how will they change? So if you're selling into HR, what's going to happen to HR and what's going to happen to their job and their industry? Third order, who do they sell to and how's that industry going to change? And the final one is just generally, how is the mainstream B2C consumers picking these tools up? Because it's usually a good indication of where things are going to go. It's why things do or don't get picked up. You can usually tell early. So in the next 5 years, that's the order of effect that I'm looking at more than say what's happening now, because I think everything's overhyped.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's a very insightful point to say we should be thinking. A lot of this is standard good consulting practice. We should be thinking about how our clients are changing and how their markets are changing. But it's they're going to be changing pretty fast. I mean, I'm getting phone calls from people in procurement, people in internal functions who are looking at AI and what it means for this is your territory, what it means for learning, and the potential transformation is remarkable in learning and development, but also other areas. Joel and Alan, what should we be looking at on the horizon when it comes to AI? How should boutiques be preparing for what's coming?
So if I can jump in, so I think I'm going to draw on a slightly different example, but nonetheless one that's really powerful. So I'm thinking about machine learning at scale here. So I think as kind of challenger boutique consulting firms, one of the big challenges we're all going to face is how do we harness the power of advanced analytical capability, whether it's LMM or NLP or machine learning or deep learning or whatever it is, to deliver better services to our clients. And how do we compete in an evolving and potentially quite different marketplace? So two things. One is some of you may have seen in the press over the weekend the announcement that Bain and Microsoft have co-developed a service offering that has been picked up by Coca-Cola as the first big global global client, and that's a combination of DALL-E and Codex and ChatGPT and its evolution. So that's a really interesting move on their part. So this matters to people in our sector. So, for example, all our clients face a massive challenge around analytical productivity. So if I kind of pin it down, if you're a large bank in your customer analytics space, in the past, you probably could get away with building 200 to 300 predictive models that you would use to drive your acquisition, growth, retention, processing. In the future, it's going to have to be several thousand models at least, if not more. So there's a bank in Australia that kind of runs an operation, manages and maintains upwards of 10,000 predictive models in production at any point in time. Now, the only way that there aren't enough data scientists around to be able to do that. So the only way that they can do it is by using a very powerful AI-based platform called H2O. And people should check that out. There are other products in that category. Data IQ is probably the other leading one at the moment. Data Robot people may have heard of. But I think as boutique consultancies, especially those of us that are involved in advanced analytics, this is something we're going to have to embrace. So we're going to have to take to our clients the ability to bring massive productivity gains in analytical processing. We're going to have to help them do that. And I think people will expect that of us. So I think the big theme over the next 5 years in our world is the expectation from our clients that we will already have worked out how to harness these technologies across the set that you outlined earlier on, Joe, and that we'll be bringing the experience and the expertise to bear on that, not only in technical terms, but also in business operating model terms, and also in the ability to optimize the application and the management of those technologies and the infrastructure. And I think we're at the very early stages of adoption of those types of technologies. I think it's going to be huge for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Joe, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think firstly, I think with Alan and Jack really tease into kind of the first leading thought that I had, which was differentiation. And Alan's point at the end, which is key, which is you'll be asked, how are you additive towards what I have from a general perspective? The other thing I think, just picking up on what you said, Alan, which really stood out for me is there is a democratization of data science, which is what these, golems I've heard of referred to, but these large language models are enabling people for. I think what we've seen with Bain and PwC is they've got a huge amount of resource and investment that they can put in towards being able to try and make the application of this in their workflows work for them, which isn't necessarily something which a lot of boutiques have available to them. There's also another point, which Alan, I think you and Jack as well, but definitely you could probably talk to, which is there is a depth of expertise you need to really be able to work with data in this way, so that you're not just cheerleaders of hype, but you're actually taking people through kind of the risks and the ethics involved in actually working with data and using this to make decisions that essentially have societal impacts. So I think that bit's quite key. It's how do you as a boutique kind of collectively start to think of how do we as an industry band together to identify what is our valuable IP, which is a point which Jack made earlier on, and what is it that we can collectively build together so that we actually are able to slot the two together, and whenever we go to those type of conversations or doing that type of work, we're able to truly differentiate on those points and those aspects. So I think that would be the first thing I would add there, Joe. The second bit, which I wanted to kind of refer to, which I don't know if anyone's mentioned as of yet, is productivity. So there is a natural inclination to think of productivity as being time. Productivity means time so that we can do things quicker and we can do things and get things out of the way quicker. It's just about quicker. The challenge back I have to that is time also is the time that you as a consultant put with your client and with your client stakeholders, because I think a lot of us will say that a lot of this type of transformation and work that consultancies do is hearts and minds. And there is a lot which the AI can support with actually getting over the mind aspect of the logic, the reasoning, why should I be doing this? And there's a huge amount which is actually more about how do I give people the confidence that where you are taking me, the time you put in with me and each of my stakeholders is truly in my best interest. And that to me is kind of the secret or the hidden benefit. That is something which we can start to work towards in the next 12 months, 18 months for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just think just building on that, the change is often centered around storytelling. So the ability to tell really good transformation stories is absolutely critical. And I think we'll see the emergence of really interesting tools. And there are already tools in place that support this. But I think to Joel's point, this is going to become an area where AI can really can really help.
There were just two things I wanted to highlight there and to build on slightly. The first is the trusted relationship isn't going anywhere. But what I've seen in the market over the last 15 years, generally with consulting, is that you have a high value market that offers personalized, innovative, trusted research and recommendations. And you have a fairly commodified, standardized market. And those have slowly been pulling apart in terms of day rates and value and all the rest of it over the last 15, 20 years. And I think this is going to exacerbate it in terms of if you are seen, I think I always advise my boutiques to turn their partners and would-be partners into trusted advisors and visible experts. And if you can position yourself in that space instead of someone that's competing with ChatGPT, then it's a different kettle of fish. So you're maintaining your position in the high value, personalized, innovative, trusted relationship thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was Joel's point about boutiques working together. I think in some ways, AI, and you said this earlier, Alan, offers boutiques an opportunity to level the playing field, to integrate with some of these AIs and offer analytics and insights that their larger competitors can do. But the downside, as Joel pointed out, is that the larger firms have resource, and I don't just mean money, I mean the sheer amounts of data that someone like KPMG has that they can use to train their own AI in whatever way they choose. And that's incredibly powerful. And for boutiques to do that, anything approximating that is going to require them to cooperate a lot more. So there's a project I'm leading at the moment, which is a cooperation between 5 boutique consultancies, really to see if they can, what type of data they can share confidentially, and so it's protected, but will allow AI a greater data set to learn. So there are opportunities there, but there's also risks for the boutique, I think.
Yeah. Can I
Sure.
Joe? So I think I absolutely accept all of that. I think there's another interesting perspective, which is the ability of, so if boutiques are threatened by the resources and the critical mass, the scale of the larger consulting firms, then those organizations themselves are threatened by high performance boutiques.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And again, just to kind of just to reflect on the analytical productivity point that I was making earlier on, I can run the equivalent of a 300-person analytical consulting team with 30 people in terms of productivity and throughput. That takes out several of the entire teams. I can compete head on with Ernst & Young, easy. Not a problem. There's a long way to go to build the operating model, the detail of that, and to deploy it in a really highly efficient way. But that's where we're going. So by the same token, we are also a threat to some of certainly the big mid-tiers, if not the. I think the whole industry is up for a bit of a resettlement around the use of these technologies. And Jack earlier on talked about jobs to be done, such a powerful concept. And if we think about AI tools in general as much better tools to hire to get jobs done really well, and if we're alert to that, and if we understand how to utilize those, then we're in for an exciting ride.
Yes, agreed. We've got 10 minutes left. I'd like, starting with Jack, I'd like your thoughts on what your average, let's say, a boutique that's doing leadership training, perhaps, or one that's doing change management, not particularly IT consulting. Let's say 50 people. What could they be doing in the next year that would allow them to take advantage of the opportunities of AI without them having to do a degree in machine learning? Jack, you go first, please.
I think first and foremost, just start. It sounds really stupid and simple, but so many people I speak to still, they're aware of it, but they've not started. Just learn how to do prompts. And you can start with something as simple as ChatGPT, but just start doing prompts. Because as soon as you start to do that, you can understand what's possible, what's not possible, what's rubbish out there and what's not. I think if I reflect on what we're doing a lot of, it's actually a lot is thinking about your IP and how do you digitize and productize that? Because when it's nebulous and it's in the middle of nowhere, or it's in the people's heads and it's stuck in heads or whatever, it becomes something that is very difficult to get into anything such as any type of model, whether it's the various different types that have been described today. There's a lot of that, to be honest, initially, if you're not already there. Now, Alan, you've said a lot, which is about you really having to focus on templating structures. The other one is thinking about data sources. So, Joe, you described capturing voice or Zoom calls or everything like that. but it's actually thinking through, okay, what is my IP and what structure must it sit in, and how do I bring that to life so I can deliver that and deploy it in the right time? A lot of our customers are delivering it at a change management, coaching, training level after a initial engagement, increase success rates or whatever. And so a lot of time has to be spent there first and foremost. The other part is, I try not to go too technical, but the other one is actually once you've got that, you can start to pull out all the different themes and you can start to really do a bit of magic. A lot of what we've been doing is essentially starting to try and see how can you clone an expert, not to make it generic and rubbish, but what do you clone, what do you not clone? What answers, to be honest, can be provided just at click of a fingers, and then what should be then input from a human? So when can a human join that conversation? So
right.
So that's something I really consider.
Thank you, Joel. Anything else to add in terms of practical steps that a boutique partner might be taking in the next few months?
So I would echo Jack's points on just start, and also to think about what you need to do to achieve your key jobs to be done as the services you provide. I think there's also Alan's point on organize, and I see that as a bring together a team to experiment, because that's fundamentally what you're doing, and see this as a not just a once-off, but this is kind of give them that remit to also think about how do you create something which can be scalable, which can be taken forward. Back to the point that we made earlier about reducing the friction by doing something that just makes people's jobs a lot easier. So I think those would probably be 3 or 4 points that come to mind there, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Alan, have you got anything to add? I've got one last question at the end, but have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've got very quickly 3 things. One, work out. This is what we're doing, so hopefully it's helpful to people. One, what drives value in your organization? So whether it's propositions or workflow, what are the big value drivers? What use cases are important around that? And then delve into the application of AI to support it and to understand. So just a really simple, very simple, straightforward framework that will guide you and steer you to places where you're going to drive value and you're going to be able to take value to your clients. It's exactly what we're doing.
This is great, because this is actually fairly not traditional, but it's just solid advice to any consultancy. And one thing that certainly my clients and the firms I've studied over the years, fairly universal, is that once they start looking at what data they have seriously, they're often surprised about the value of it. And I've had a couple of consulting firms start off as consulting firms and then in effect move to platform providers or benchmarking services or just simply data providers, because there's more value in it, and obviously the cost is a lot less. And so I think there's a fairly consistent call there to look at your data, respect it, organize it well, and then think about whether it's AI, whether it's automation, whether it's simply a benchmarking tool. Look at the value that can bring your company and your clients. One final thing I wanted to ask before I give my
before you do that,
sorry, Joel, go on.
Sorry, two things to add on to that. Look at your data, but look at it from the context of what adds value to your client, and look at it from the context of, as a workflow, as you use that data, what is a messy substandard workflow that you can do much more effectively to achieve that job to be done, that outcome for your client. That's the thing I wanted to add there. And then the last bit I wanted to add was just reiterate the mindset switch. You are moving firms that love to be nearly 80-90% correct to a state where they have to effectively dare to fail.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'm pleased you keep talking about jobs to be done, because one of my clients is the fantastic Tony Clark, who was quite integral to building the jobs to be done literature. Listen, we had a question in from Chris Harper, a very good question, and I don't want to give my view on it straight away, but he's saying, when I plan for hiring into the September and into 2024, should I assume productivity will increase sufficiently that I may not need to hire as many consulting staff? I worry about his consulting staff. 100% utilization, I fear. So listen, what are your views on this? Can we automatically assume that productivity is going to be higher, or do we need to put things in place to ensure it's going to be higher?
I'll jump. If the time frame is in the next 18 months, absolutely not. There's a lot of work to do to learn how to use these tools really well, to embed them within the organization. Each of us needs to go through our own kind of maybe not so mini change program, our own transformation. And we have no plans whatsoever to reduce or scale back the recruitment goals that we have over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Jack, do you agree?
100% agree with Adam. There will undoubtedly be an impact on how you train, develop, and sell your people. But fundamentally, back to your point, Joe and Jack's at the start, it's not happened yet. You need to understand it, get involved in it, and work through the changes as they happen.
Yeah. I think in the same way is you build the working group, you test, and you see the real question is not maybe how I should first cut costs. I would first go and how do we deliver exponential more value at the same level? Yeah. And then go, okay, now we're at the right benchmark. Then what do we start to, what's actually not delivering? What can be replaced? Because the last bit before we end, I'm sure, is the next big evolution of what will come out very soon is AI that can train AI models. And that is what everybody's working on, because suddenly things will move very, 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 very quickly, but we're not there yet. But at this point, make sure, you're the expert in this.
Good. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. I need to apologise to Tony. I said his name was Tony Clark. For some reason, I got it wrong. It's Tony Ulwick, one of the key people with jobs to be done. It's a great guy. Not on the call, unfortunately, but do look him up. Brilliant. Listen, guys, I'm sure all of us could talk about this for another 2 or 3 hours, and perhaps we will afterwards. But for everyone on the call, thank you for coming. Really great insights. Look up the links of everyone in the call, which will be published by Jack and Dexter. But in the meantime, thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody.